Today I'd like to talk about dancing on your chips. This comes from a great story of this lady who had this really difficult day. She woke up in the morning and the dog was sick and she had to go to the vet, and her child didn't want to go to school and was causing trouble at home, and the car wouldn't start, and I'm sure that we've all had one of those days. Anyway, the day went on and on and on, and she got home in the evening. The husband got home and she was just kind of downloading to him all of the troubles of her day, and she pulled out a big packet of chips and she couldn't open the packet, and as she pulled it open, it tore down the seams on both sides, and the entire contents of this packet just fell on the floor in the kitchen. And she took one look at it and she burst into tears, and her husband looked at her and looked at these chips and he had no idea what to do. So in a moment of grand inspiration, he put on his dancing shoes, as it were, and leapt into the air and started to do a merry jig, dancing all over these chips. And she took one look at him and she just burst out laughing, and the two of them flattened those chips into tiny little particles as they killed the entire packet on the floor. And the moral of the story is, sometimes when you've had a really bad day, week, month, some people have had a very bad life, but whenever it is that you're in one of those seasons, we forget to dance on our chips. And I don't know what you're going through right now in terms of something that's accumulating. Maybe at work there's pressures about retrenchments and there's cash flow issues at home, and the kids aren't doing well and your teenagers are being rebellious. I don't know what it is. And you get home and you just kind of want to slump down on the chair. Well, you know what? We have sense of humor failure. And I've noticed that I'm hearing far less jokes these days and people are doing far less laughing. And I think that we need to get back to the place that we know we're going to make it through to the other side. This is just a little season that we've got to get through. So a couple of things about dancing on your chips. Number one, recognize that it happens to all of us. Whether you're rich or you're poor, you're famous or obscure, it doesn't matter. I've worked with people in all categories of life, and there's always a dancing on your chips day in anybody's life. So number one, you are not alone in what you're going through right now. This here has happened to everybody in the last thousands of years, and it will happen in the next few thousand years. And just because it's happening to you, you will make it, I promise. Okay? You will not die. You will be okay. Number two is that you've got to think in your mind about how you got through it in the past. Go backwards in your mind and say, when I really had a very bad time, how did I get through it? What did I do? Sometimes you just had a good cry, or you just had a good shout at something, and if you're very physical, you went on the squash court and you kind of beat that little black ball to death, but you did something to kind of alleviate the stress and the pain of it. So think about mechanisms you've used in the past and try and see if you can use them again in the future. Obviously, I'm not telling you to go and beat anybody up or go and do anything dangerous, but just find ways to kind of defuse. The third thing is identify one thing you can do right now to make it better. What's just one thing you can do? Maybe you just need to go out for supper with your husband, like that lady, and just go out and just talk it through and just kind of chill. Maybe there's other things that are available to you. I know for me, when I have days like that, funnily enough, giving my state secrets away here, but I go lie in the bath and do a good crossword, and I just chill out. How's that? So if your water bill goes up high, or electricity bill, don't blame me, but that's what I like to do sometimes. Another thing that I found, which is of interest, and I'd like anybody to phone in and tell me if you disagree, but I have this as a personal theory. I read this somewhere and I think I've modified it myself a little bit, but it says this, that 95% of your fears will never ever come true. Those things that we get all anxious about, all worried about, and all het up about, most of those things do not happen. How many parents have sat up till 2 o'clock in the morning waiting for the kids to come home, convinced that they've had an accident, and guess what? Your child stumbles into bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and looks at you with bleary eyes just as bad as yours and says, "What are you doing here?" You go to bed, because they're okay. And here's my little ad, my little rider to is, I believe that of the 5% of fears that do come true, I think 3% of those are actually not very serious. Probably 2% are very, very serious. So it's time for us to dance on our chips.